I've noticed we're losing subscribers. Not the YouTube kind, but the kind that swore they'd be in my life forever. Funny how that works. One day you're surrounded by people who claim to love you, and the next, you're watching them walk away like you were just another phase in their lives. By the way, if you're here, do me a favor, subscribe. It's free, and unlike some people in my life, you won't regret sticking around. I was never supposed to be here. Not really. Not in their eyes. My parents spent years praying for a daughter, convinced that their family wasn't truly complete until they had one. But instead they got me, a boy. A placeholder. A spare, as they called me when they thought I wasn't listening. I'm 35 now, a software developer at a major West Coast tech company, living the life I built from the ground up. Good job, nice apartment, solid investments. From the outside it looks like I made it. But something happened recently that forced me to face the past I worked so hard to leave behind. After 17 years, my parents reached out. Out of the blue. No warning. No, how have you been? Just a request. They needed help, with my sister. Their miracle child. To understand why this shattered me, you need to know what happened when she was born. Before my sister, my parents tolerated me at best. My dad was a real estate agent, my mom a high school teacher, and we were comfortable financially. But they still acted like I was draining their resources, like every meal, every school supply, every dime spent on me was wasted. Family members tried to convince them to appreciate me, to see their healthy son as a blessing. But my parents would just shake their heads and say, "Unless it's a girl, we don't really have a child yet." I tried. I really did. In middle school, I discovered computers and coding, something that actually made me feel like I had value. My computer science teacher saw my passion and mentored me, giving me access to the school lab after hours so I could practice. I'd come home excited, eager to share my progress, only for my parents to nod absent-mindedly and return to discussing their latest fertility treatments. Then, when I was 15, she was born. And everything changed. The house, once quiet, erupted with joy. My parents had finally gotten what they wanted. My sister was showered with love, affection, everything. I became invisible. I remember bringing home a trophy after winning a state-level programming competition. It came with a small college scholarship. I stood there waiting for something, pride, acknowledgement, even just a good job. But they barely looked up from watching my sister stack 3 blocks on top of each other. That, apparently, was worthy of a cake and a family celebration. I learned quickly, I wasn't part of their family. So I focused on my studies, on coding, on making a future for myself. I freelanced on the side, secretly saving money. Some part of me knew I'd need it. And I was right. On my 18th birthday, instead of a party, I got an important discussion. My sister needed a bigger playroom, they explained, and my bedroom was the perfect space. I had been given enough time to prepare. It was time for me to leave. I protested. I told them I wasn't ready, that I needed time to find a place. They didn't care. My father handed me an envelope with $500, my startup money, and that was it. I was out. When my father handed me that $500 envelope and told me to leave, I thought I was losing everything. But in reality, I was finally free. I had until the weekend to be gone. It was Tuesday. I shoved my laptop, some clothes, and the $3,000 I had secretly saved from freelancing into an old high school backpack. The rest, whatever I could carry, went into trash bags. As I packed, my 3-year-old sister stood in the doorway, watching me with wide, uncomprehending eyes. She didn't know what was happening. She didn't know that her arrival had made me disposable. The first few years were brutal. I bounced between friends' couches, careful never to overstay my welcome. I worked anywhere that would take me, day labor at construction sites, overnight shifts at 7-Eleven, freelance coding when I could find clients. During the day, I camped out in public libraries, using their computers to teach myself new programming languages, applying for jobs between studying. Food came from the dollar store, mostly ramen and whatever was cheapest. Sometimes I didn't eat at all. Winter was the worst. I had to choose between food or a warm place to sleep. And through it all, I still tried to reach out to my parents. I called, hoping, praying, for some sign that they cared, that maybe they regretted what they had done. But every conversation was the same. They never asked if I was okay. Never asked how I was surviving. Instead, they told me about my sister's preschool milestones, her favorite cartoons, her latest achievements. When I told them I was taking community college courses while working, they barely reacted. I gave up after 2 years. They never once called me. Not for my birthday. Not for the holidays. Not even to see if I was alive. So I moved on. I built myself from nothing. I learned to code during my shifts at the convenience store, reading documentation on my phone. I worked on freelance projects at the public library, the only place that had free Wi-Fi, air conditioning, and, most importantly, computers. The library became my second home. Then I caught my first break. A small company took a chance on me as a junior developer. The pay wasn't great, but it was a lifeline. I worked insane hours, learning everything I could: cloud computing, database administration, system architecture. I took on every small project they threw at me. I kept coding on weekends, contributing to open source projects, building my own apps. And then, the real moment of change. A major tech company noticed my work. They reached out. I went through 6 rounds of grueling interviews. And when they finally made me an offer, my life changed forever. That was 7 years ago. Today, I lead a major project team as a senior software engineer. I have financial security, a modern apartment, and investments that ensure I'll never struggle again. I built a life without them. And then, 3 days ago, after 17 years of silence, my father's number appeared on my phone. I froze. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. But when I answered, his voice, aged, frantic, made it clear it couldn't wait. They needed to talk about my sister. The perfect child. The one who mattered. She was in trouble. A lot of trouble. 13 years old. Skipping school. Shoplifting. Running with older kids my parents despised. Police involvement. Drugs found in her room twice. 3 different rehab programs, all failed. And then the real reason for the call. The money. More than $200,000 gone. 17 years. 17 years of silence. 17 years of struggling, of surviving, of building myself into something. And now, suddenly, I was their only hope. The desperate phone call from my father was just the beginning. My mother followed up next, her voice trembling, thick with emotion. They had nowhere else to turn, she said. Family needs to stick together, she pleaded. You're our only chance to save your sister. The same people who threw me out with a $500 envelope. The same people who never called, never checked if I was alive. Now they wanted over $100,000 to save their daughter. They had already burned through everything, sold valuables, maxed out credit cards, remortgaged their house. Therapy, rehab, legal bills, it had all added up. And now they were considering a $75,000 long-term treatment program. If I couldn't pay all at once, my father suggested a payment plan. I had the money. Years of grinding, saving, investing, I was in a stable financial position. But the thought of opening my bank account for them made me physically sick. Where was this family unity when I was sleeping in my car? When I went hungry? When I spent nights in public libraries just to have shelter? And yet, there was my sister. A 13-year-old girl drowning in the same toxic family dynamic that nearly destroyed me. Maybe if someone had helped me at that age, things would have turned out differently. Maybe I could be that someone for her. But then I remembered, they don't care about me. They only care about what I can give them. They called again yesterday. This time they wanted to meet in person. They offered to drive 4 hours to see me. Suggested we meet at an expensive restaurant in my neighborhood. Something about their enthusiasm unsettled me. They were trying too hard. My partner, who has seen the years of therapy and self-work I've put in, warned me to set boundaries. My best friend, the one who let me crash on his couch during the hardest years, suggested a compromise. Help my sister directly but not them. Now I'm stuck between my head and my heart. Rationally, I know that letting my parents back in could undo everything I've built. They don't see me as a son, they see me as a resource. But emotionally? I can't stop thinking about my sister. If I walk away, am I just continuing the cycle of abandonment? Or would helping just be playing into their manipulation? I don't know what to do. For now, I've made one decision. I'll meet them. But on my terms. No fancy restaurant. Just a coffee shop. Neutral ground. Let's see what they really have to say. I thought I was done. I thought I had finally walked away. But my family had one more trick up their sleeve. It wasn't my parents this time. It was my sister. I don't even know her, not really. She was only a baby when I left. The last time I saw her, she was 3 years old, watching from the doorway as I packed my things into trash bags. And yet, when I answered an unfamiliar number earlier today, I instantly recognized her voice. At first she was polite. Almost sweet. She made her case carefully, clearly rehearsed. Our parents were struggling, they had done so much for me, and now it was my turn to help them. I calmly explained that my relationship with our parents was complicated and that I had to make the best decision for myself. Then, in an instant, her tone changed. She snapped. Accused me of being selfish. Claimed I had always been jealous of her. Said I was arrogant for leaving and abandoning our family to deal with the consequences. I barely got a word in before she hung up. I sat there, stunned. Because those words, they weren't hers. They were my parents. And suddenly it all made sense. I called them immediately, demanded the truth. What had they told her about me? After an eerie silence, they finally admitted it. For years, they had fed my sister a twisted version of history. They told her that I left because I resented her, that I had abandoned them out of spite, that I had refused to share their attention and ran away because I was too selfish to be part of a family. They erased the truth. They erased everything. They never told her how they had pushed me aside from the moment she was born, how they expelled me the second I turned 18, how they never once called, checked in, or cared if I was alive. Instead, they turned me into the villain of their story. My sister, this stranger who shares my blood, has hated me her entire life because of their lies. I hung up. And now I don't know what to do. I don't blame her for believing them. She was just a kid. I blame them for weaponizing her, for using her to manipulate me, for taking away the one connection I might have had to this family. And the worst part? I wonder if things could have been different. If I had reached out sooner, if she had known the truth, could I have helped her? Could I have been the older brother she needed? Now, though, it feels impossible. My parents still see me as nothing but a resource. My sister resents me for reasons she doesn't even understand. And I'm left sitting here, exhausted, questioning everything. I know what the logical answer is. Walk away. Block them all. Move on. But it's not that easy. Because no matter what, they are still my family. And whether I like it or not, a part of me will always want to know what happens next. This is it. The final chapter in a story I never wanted to tell. If you've been following along, you know how much I've struggled with this. I spent years carrying the weight of my parents' choices, questioning whether I owed them something simply because we share blood. And when they came back into my life, they brought with them a storm of guilt, manipulation, and lies. I tried to hold firm. I tried to set boundaries. And in the end, they finally did the one thing they should have done years ago. They apologized. But it was too late. They had already destroyed our relationship. They had already lost me. And now they've lost everything else too. They're bankrupt. They've sold almost all their possessions. And worst of all, they abandoned my sister just like they abandoned me. She's only 13. She moved in with a friend's family, and my parents, who once used her as their perfect child, simply let her go. They told me it was my fault. That if I had just helped, none of this would have happened. That I could have saved them. But I finally saw through it all. I refused to carry their burden anymore. I told them the truth, that they did this to themselves. That their selfishness, their favoritism, their refusal to take responsibility for their actions led them to this exact moment. And for the first time, they stopped making excuses. For the first time, they admitted they were wrong. It should have mattered. It should have meant something. But it didn't change anything. I can't erase years of neglect and pain just because they suddenly regret it. I can't risk the life I've worked so hard to build just to clean up their mess. So I told them I was done. I hung up, and this time I knew this was the last time. I wish things had been different. I wish they had realized what they were doing before it was too late. I wish my sister hadn't been dragged into this broken family dynamic. And maybe, just maybe, I'll reach out to her one day. Maybe I'll try to help her in a way my parents never helped me. But for now, I'm choosing peace. I'm choosing myself. Because sometimes, the hardest lesson we learn is that not every story gets a happy ending. Does this story resonate with you? If you've ever had to walk away from a toxic family situation, if you've ever struggled with guilt over putting yourself first, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. And if this story spoke to you, if it made you think, if it helped you feel a little less alone, please like, share, and subscribe. Because no one should have to go through this alone. And if my story can help even one person find the strength to choose themselves, then maybe it was worth telling.